Good evening, a very warm welcome and a happy St Patrick's Day. My name's Shana Wright, I'm Head of Prep at Embley. Welcome to the third Lessons from Our Kitchen Table workshop, a series which we hope will continue to help your child with various aspects of their academic study. The focus of the series so far has been on providing top tips to support your child with reading, writing and now this evening we turn our attention to mathematics or numeracy. Even the word maths can spark a reaction in both adults and children alike. For some, their experience of maths at school is linked with negative memories and also possibly uncertainty about their own ability and levels of confidence. When supporting your child with maths, it's important to think about that mindset. We underestimate the impact our own narrative can have on the way our children approach subjects such as maths. The incidental "I was never good at maths at school" comments are ones to be really mindful of. It will have a significant impact on your child's attitude to maths and create a closed mindset, which is then challenging to shift in later years. Just stop to think. You would never say "I was never any good at reading at school," so the same should be true for maths. In prep, years 3 and 4 in particular are pivotal years as children build the foundations of their knowledge, which then allows them to apply that knowledge. I'll focus this evening on maths mastery and prep from early years to year 6, and I'm delighted to say I'll be joined then by Rob Clare, Head of Maths at Embley. And Rob will talk about mathematics in senior school, the transition from year 6 to 7, mathematics in the 21st century, and how to tackle a fixed maths mindset. If I could have the next slide, please. Thankfully, maths teaching has moved on considerably since I was at school in the 1980s. I cast my mind back to the 100 times tables questions that I used to answer silently in a weekly tables test. And I must admit, when I was 10, my maths learning was not especially filled with joy or creativity. Times tables is both competitive and exciting at Embley as children battle it out to be TT rock stars. I honestly don't know how they think that quickly, but they're pretty fabulous. In modern maths teaching, the foundations and fundamentals are still very important, but it doesn't end there. There's so much more to inspire pupils, from the creativity and curiosity encouraged through problem solving to playing with and recognising pattern in number. Primary maths focuses on mastery and then greater depth. It starts with cementing those building blocks and foundations, making sure they aren't shaky, and that's really important. So significant time is spent focusing on gaining deep knowledge. With firm foundations, problems can be set in different contexts, which rely on pupils to then puzzle out which operations they will use, often by year 6 in multi-step problems. So what is teaching for mastery? In the words of the NCETM, which is the National Centre for Excellence in Teaching of Mathematics, mastering maths means pupils of all ages acquiring a deep, long-term, secure and adaptable understanding of the subject. The phrase teaching for mastery describes the elements of classroom practice and school organisation that combine to give pupils the best chance of mastering maths. Achieving maths mastery means acquiring a solid enough understanding of the maths that's been taught to enable pupils to move on to more advanced material. This maths mastery approach rejects the notion that some people can't do maths. It instills a belief in pupils: if you work hard at maths, you can succeed. If pupils fail to understand a concept, interventions are put in place quickly, and early intervention ensures that the pupil is then ready to move forward. And where does it all begin? In reception, the maths mastery approach is about deepening understanding of concepts rather than moving on to more complex numbers. That way, concepts can be revisited as children follow their interests and they begin to connect this new learning to previous experiences. Can I have the next slide, please? When it comes to maths teaching in the early years, it's important that children begin to develop a sense of the underlying concepts and structures of maths. Here are some thoughts and tips based on the research and resource development by specialist Katie Hyatt, who developed Power Maths for reception. First of all, it's about building those firm foundations. Some children may come to school already fluently counting to 10 and beyond, but do they really deeply understand what these numbers mean? Just being able to recite number in a sequence is only the first step in understanding the mathematics behind what they represent. For example, what is the number 4? Can a child show you what is one more or one less? At Embley, we use a range of techniques, and there are some that you could try at home. Challenge your child to show a variety of representations of each number. Use real life objects, we use maths equipment, you could use drawings, sound and movement. So having fun with maths is really important. Ask them to pick 5 pencils from a pot of 10. Recognise numbers out of sequence and to find all the pairs of numbers that make up 5 or 10. A wide variety of activities help children develop a deep understanding of the composition of numbers and a sense of what happens when they manipulate the numbers. An important core skill that they need to master in order to be successful in maths later on. Concrete, pictorial and abstract. So the concrete pictorial abstract approach, the CPA approach, supports teaching for mastery, and we use this approach across the prep school. In the CPA approach, children explore new maths concepts in a concrete way, using real life situations and objects and using mathematical representations, such as counters or a 10 frame, in order to help them make sense of abstract numbers and symbols. Being able to touch, feel and manipulate the maths is an ideal way to help children develop an understanding of the underlying concepts. The next step is to move children from the solid starting point to a pictorial approach. So teaching children how to represent objects is a good starting point. It's not practical to get 3 sheep and 2 cows into the room to sort them. So what could the children use instead to help them? Moving from a representation with a clear link, such as toy versions of the animals, to representation with something less obviously linked, such as counters and a part-whole model, which is where you'd have a circle with the whole number and then 2 circles with the number divided up and then different pictures. So that's what we use in school. It ensures children develop an understanding of the representation, building a firm foundation for later success in maths. In order to really achieve mastery, children should begin to develop abstract mathematical thinking, which is something we can begin to do in the early years. But abstract maths doesn't have to mean formal written maths in the early years. And understanding that the number 3 relates to 3 objects is an abstract concept to a 4-year-old. To help develop an abstract understanding, try using sound and movement. How many claps can you hear? Can you hop 5 times? Activities like these ensure children are not relying solely on visual cues, helping them to take a step forwards towards the abstract. Demystifying mathematical language and also celebrating it. When introducing new mathematical concepts, we use correct mathematical language from the start so that it becomes normal and not scary. Mathematical concepts and their associated language are embedded into everyday classroom life to help children to understand how the concepts apply in a variety of real life situations. For example, asking children to line up in 2s or 3s, to sort pens and pencils into different pots as part of tidying up, and to talk about the properties of everyday objects. We make sure we're regularly using the mathematical language introduced and encourage children to use it too. Developing a growth mindset, and you'll hear this theme all the way through this evening. A key way to help children become ready for Key Stage 1 is to embed a growth mindset right from the start. Made a mistake? No worries. Learn from it and have another go. Something you tried hasn't worked? What could you try instead? Growth mindset attitudes to learning will help children become confident, curious and resilient learners, and that's something really positive and powerful you can be reinforcing at home. Not just in maths, but across the whole curriculum, setting them up for future success. Mastery through play. So setting up mathematical activities for children to explore independently is a great way to reinforce concepts during free flow time or play. Every time maths is built into an everyday activity, it helps embed and reinforce understanding of the concept. This is incorporated practically by creating displays of seasonal objects for children to count, sort and explore. And that could be done through going on nature walks, walking down the street and counting the number of rectangular letterboxes. There's all sorts of different incidental ways that you can do this. We set mathematical rules, such as allowing only 3 children to play with the sand at a time. It leads to opportunities for discussion, such as how many children are there now? Is there room for 1 more? Are there enough spades for each child? And this is something that you can do. So even suggesting activities such as setting the table for 4 teddy bears in the home corner, so you can have a teddy bears picnic at home. Can I have the next slide, please? So what are the aims of the primary curriculum? It's about 3 key areas: fluency of number, recall and mental maths, the ability to reason mathematically and explain mathematical concepts, and to problem solve applying skills to real life concepts. Can I have the next slide, please? In order to become more confident with number, it's important that children become increasingly confident with calculation strategies. I've just picked up one example, but there are lots of different ones. I will use addition as an example to show you how the skills build. So in Key Stage 1 and beyond, children will use a number line to help them see and understand addition. So when adding 24 and 12, you'd add 10 first and then 2. So that would be done in a similar way to the slide you see on the screen there. And we could be using frogs hopping on lily pads as well, just to make that a bit more user friendly for our younger ones. Can I have the next slide, please? Subtraction would work in much the same way. So taking the 10 first and then 2 and subtracting 12. If I could have the next slide, please. Then addition using partitioning and understanding the place value of number is vital to all numeracy. For example, to do this calculation correctly, a child needs to know that 24 is 2 10s and 4 1s. Partitioning enables a greater understanding of how 2 numbers can be added together and will lead to more efficient methods such as column addition. Here we would start with this as a written strategy with children recording their workings and then moving on to it becoming a quick mental method that they could use to add 2 digits or even larger numbers. So it's about mastering and developing that depth of knowledge and understanding. They begin by partitioning each number into 10s and 1s. They would then add the 10s and the 1s separately before combining the totals to reach the answer. If I could have the next slide, please. An understanding of the place value and partitioning then leads on to more formal methods. So this is a strategy I was certainly taught at school and is the one you're probably much more familiar and comfortable with. Here we discuss laying out the numbers carefully, ensuring they're placed in the correct place value column. And we would then add the numbers in the 1s column and then the 10s column. If I could have the next slide, please. And the last one in our calculation strategies for addition. So an extension to this would be to teach addition using column method with exchanging. So you can see how the size of the numbers increase as well as the methods available. It's about building this calculation strategy toolkit and then when faced with a question or problem, developing the confidence to know which methods to draw from. If I could have the next slide, please. So we've thought about practical methods which children use. Before we move on to our live interview, here is an overview of Mastery Maths teaching, the method we use. This diagram shows the 5 big ideas which underpin Maths Mastery teaching as specified by NCETM. This is drawn from research evidence and helps to bind these ideas together. And here's a flavour of what really lies behind them. Coherence. So lessons are broken down into small but connected steps that gradually unfold the concept, providing access for all children and leading to a generalisation of the concept and the ability to apply the concept in a range of contexts. And that's when you know mastery has truly taken place, is actually when they've got an understanding of how to use that method, but the question asked is posed in a different way. It's sort of flipped on its head and they can still then use that knowledge to apply that to the problem. Representation and structure. Representations used in lessons expose the mathematical structure being taught. So the aim being that students can do the maths without recourse to the representation. Mathematical thinking. If taught ideas are to be understood deeply, which is everything, they must not merely be passively received, but must be worked on by the pupil, by the child, thought about, reasoned with and discussed with others. So I think there's sometimes a misunderstanding with maths that you answer questions, you move on, but actually that collaboration, that discussion, the reasoning and thinking and talking through problems, it ignites that interest as well, that sense of curiosity, and it's really important. Fluency, so quick and efficient recall of facts and procedures, and the flexibility to move between different contexts and representations of maths. And that, again, that comes with confidence. Variation is twofold. So it's firstly about how the teacher represents the concept being taught, often in more than one way, to draw attention to critical aspects and to develop deep and holistic understanding. It's also about the sequencing of the episodes, activities and exercises used within a lesson, and follow-up practice, paying attention to what is kept the same and what changes, to connect the mathematics and draw attention to mathematical relationships and structure. So that's a sort of an overview of mastery. And the curriculum actually has changed over the past few years, and expectation increased. A large portion of content which sat in the secondary curriculum in years 7 and 8 is now in the primary curriculum in year 6. This has led to a greater level of difficulty, and the approach requires a really deep understanding, achieved not through pages of repetitive sums, but through a mastery approach. If I could have the next slide, please. And the one after that. Thank you very much. So this greater level of difficulty has meant the following content now sits with younger year groups. So everything's sort of shifted down. So there's an extra level of challenge for all year groups in maths in prep. In year 6, for example, children are now expected to understand radius, diameter and circumference, area of triangles and parallelograms, algebra, bibmus, volume of 3D shapes and dividing fractions. So that's on top of everything else. I was thinking about how to present the coverage in the curriculum, and there's actually so much that I would have sat here for quite some time going through it with you. So I thought I'll focus on the additional content that the children are now having to work their way through and really understand. So you can see the knock-on effect that it's had in other year groups as well. If I could have the next slide, please. More challenging time, fractions and measure work sits in year 3 and 2, and year 1 a greater level of difficulty in the understanding of number. So this has happened over the past few years, but the coverage is vast. If I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. I think we might be behind a slide. I think we're there. So the mastery approach builds all the way through prep, right to the end of year 6, and then links are made when children move to year 7. But this just gives you a flavour of how much the children are learning each and every day in their maths lessons in school. I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by Rob Clare this evening, Head of Maths across Embley, who will explain a little bit further, and I'm going to ask him a few questions. So if I could have the next slide, please. Apologies, I think you were a little bit behind when I was talking then. Welcome, Rob. So, so first question for you. What does a 21st century problem-solving curriculum look like?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And it's really obvious, actually, when you've been speaking about how the same key ideas and themes that start in the prep continue the whole way through Embley, and the way that we talk about maths and the way that we kind of develop them is started with you, and we push them and push them and push them using those ideas. So I've got this quote, and it's from Shakuntala Devi, and she is an Indian mathematician. She holds the record for the fastest human computation. And she says this: "What is mathematics? It is only a systematic effort of solving puzzles posed by nature." And I think that mathematics has always been the same. It's about solving puzzles. Okay, and it's about having a systematic approach of doing that. The way we think about things in a mathematical ways actually is what maths is about. And I want to give you an example of this. So this is actually a question that I posed my year 7s today. And if you ever are to walk alongside I think the promenade at Morecambe Bay, you'll see this in the ground. It said, "It would take 20 million years to fill Morecambe Bay from a bathtub. And I just leave that with my year 7s for a moment and say, what questions are coming to mind? What are you thinking about? And they'll start having questions. Well, 20 million years, how fast is a bathtub? Why are we even doing this? You know, these kind of questions kind of come up and say, well, what can we find out? What can we do? How useful can this be? And what would be the maths? And then in the end, we come up, well, we need to know how fast water comes out of a bath tap. And so you say, well, it's about 6 litres per minute. So what can we say about Morecambe Bay? And then we can think about the maths that we would need for that. Mathematicians is about being a mathematician is about the way that you think about maths. And it doesn't matter what job that someone goes on to do. If they're making a diagnosis, if they're developing a business, if they're arguing a point in a debate, if they're, you know, sailing around the Isle of Wight, any job that you have or any adventure requires you to pose questions and think systematically about how you're going to solve those problems. And that is what we're trying to do in mathematics. Of course, it's about the maths, but it's so much more than that. And this is one of the main reasons why I love maths. Mathematics is a safe environment where we get to play with the way that we think and solve problems which actually can go on to jobs that actually need it, but also help you in jobs that don't. We always do talk about mathematical thinking in every lesson, and we have, I think it's 8 different ways that we think about it. So exploring and noticing structure, working systematically, thinking strategically, posing questions and making conjectures, visualizing, mathematical modeling, representing, reasoning, justifying, convincing and proof. And those things are mathematical, but there's so much more. And I think this is what mathematics in the 21st century is about. It's about giving you skills for life.
Fantastic, thank you so much. And you know, I think you might have answered some of the next question as well with your passion and your enthusiasm. So how do we overcome a fixed mindset for a student who perhaps finds things difficult in maths?
Yes, and I know we've said this already, but it really is the biggest obstacle to success. As you said, that actually sometimes, unfortunately, it is at home that these things start. So I wonder, putting you on the spot, parents, I'm afraid, have you ever said anything like, I just don't have that type of brain? Or our family is more creative, not really mathematical? Or it's okay, you're good at other things? Well, those statements, that's none of my experience. Every child can succeed and does succeed. Not being creative, I've got to say mathematics is about being creative. It is the essence. You cannot do mathematics without being creative, about thinking, can I try this? Will this work? Oh, I need to try something different. Let's try a different approach that I've never done before. And also, you know, mathematical skills, as I say, are life skills. They are not optional. I want to kind of use the example of kind of sport. So I've got a picture here of Cristiano Ronaldo, and he's quite famous for coming in early for training and leaving late. And in those sessions, he's not doing a full game at all. What he's doing is he's doing little drills. And so we build a culture of success by having short, achievable goals where we basically say, well, I'm going to focus on this little bit now. This little bit that builds into the whole. We don't say we're going to do simultaneous equations straight away. We do little bits and as we go. And then a student can see, I can do this little bit. And then 5 minutes later, we have another goal. And they can do this little bit. And this is exactly the way that someone like Cristiano Ronaldo trains. He doesn't say he's going to go for a full match. He says, first of all, I'm going to practice my corners. I'm then going to practice my heading. I'm then going to practice my penalties and my free kicks. And when he gets in the game, it's so natural that when he needs those tools, then he can pick them up because he's got confident on every single part of his game. And therefore, he's confident when he goes to the bigger problems that he needs to face. And it's exactly the same with mathematics. If you break it down and you can see that you can have success in the small things, when you build it together, you're used to that success and you can put it all together.
Fantastic. And that does such an excellent job at then building up confidence, because then you can apply that knowledge so well. Fantastic, thank you. And then last of all from me, and then we can turn to some questions from our parents watching. How can we be ready for year 7, or how can parents be ready for year 7 assembly? Fantastic.
So fluency, reasoning and problem solving were 3 things that you mentioned, and those are the key things that we want students to be doing, you know, as quickly as they can in year 7. And I want to particularly focus on fluency, actually, because that is the main thing that holds back our students. So I'll give an example from year 7. So in year 7, we cover fractions again quite quickly, which you do in year 6. And then we do algebra, and then we do algebraic fractions. And before they know it, before Easter, they're doing grade 6, B grade GCSE, algebraic fractions. Now that, because we do it small, little steps by little steps, the students don't realise how quickly they're going. The students that do realise it are the ones that are not fluent with their times tables, with their factors, with their multiples. The ones that are still thinking stuff, what's the highest common factor of these when I'm doing my fractions? What's the lowest common multiple? What's my times tables? How do I divide this? If they've got if they're still working really hard at doing that, then they find the additional steps obviously quite heavy. But if you're fluent, then everything seems easy. I lived in Central America and taught for a couple of years, and I would go out and I would speak to people, but I was never fluent. I could never enjoy a joke. I could never, just kind of have a big conversation, get really deep with anyone, because I wasn't fluent. I couldn't really enjoy my conversations. Fluency allows you to enjoy it. So to be ready, we're going to put some work together, and we'll send it out to people over the summer. And within that, there will be some questions to almost warm up for September. After having 6-8 weeks off, you may have forgotten about it, got out of the habits, but to bring those habits back, to become more fluent with your mathematics. But on top of that, I think it's really important that we have reasoning within our lessons in secondary, as in prep. We expect students to be able to explain what they're thinking. And so as a parent, while they're doing this, say, how would you do this? Can you explain to me how this works? So they can practice that reasoning. And finally, problem solving. Problem solving is taking those tools that you've learned and thinking, how am I going to apply them to this problem? And we will put some of those questions in there. And our plan is this summer to actually put together a problem solving week within prep, or potentially longer, and really emphasize those skills that go with that. So yes, be ready to receive some work if you're coming into year 7 next year.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Rob. And I've I've been here since September, and actually I'm so enjoying hearing about maths in senior school and where the children go next. And I must say, if I'd had a teacher with your passion and excitement about maths, I probably would have done a little bit better at maths in school myself. So thank you very much. So Charlotte, do we have any questions this evening at all?
Hi, no, we haven't received any questions. Oh, sorry, we've just had one question just come through. So the question is, how do you support children who do struggle with maths, and how do you keep them motivated? Okay,
so if I talk from a prep school perspective, yeah, so it's really important. Confidence is really important, and actually keeping them with you and keeping that confidence going, as I said, to make sure we don't sort of shut down and start with a sort of a closed mindset. So those little interventions that I talked about earlier are really key. So the mastery curriculum is all about that. So for those children who are finding things tricky, or having sort of moments where they're not very confident, for some it could be a number, for other children it could be fractions, and that's quite a nice thing about maths, is actually nobody is fantastic straight away with all of the different elements. So actually we put interventions in place with either TA support, differentiated work within the classroom, one-to-one with the teacher, but it's little and often based on those different topics. Hopefully that answers the question. I don't know, Rob, did you want to answer from a senior point of view?
Yes, so from a senior point of view, we do little assessments every 2 weeks on the work that they have covered. And if we find that there is a weakness for that student, not only do we build that into lessons that are coming up, identifying that and working on that, but we run help sessions every lunchtime that students can come along and have that one-to-one help. We honestly believe that the cycle we want them to get into is not a cycle of just confidence for the sake of confidence, but confidence because they are succeeding. And actually it can take a little bit of time for students to realise, actually, if I work a little bit harder, then I can succeed. and then that makes me want to work a little bit harder, and then I succeed some more. And so actually we're trying to turn that mindset, as you say, that tide, and actually put things in place so that it's almost a self-perpetuating loop of success that they can then carry on themselves.
Fantastic, thank you. Charlotte, did you have any more questions?
I do. Perhaps on the flip side. So when on the opposite side of what we've just been talking about, so those who've mastered and really progressing with maths, how do we enrich the students? What do we make questions harder or make the subjects broader? What's our strategy behind the stretch and challenge for maths?
Perfect. So when, as I said before, it's about mastery and all sort of having that depth of knowledge. But then after that, there's the greater depth. So there's being able to apply that knowledge in a range of more challenging settings. So like all areas across the curriculum, children don't all learn in the same ways, and children aren't always at the same sort of attainment level in different areas. So making sure we differentiate for individuals and groups and the whole class is really, really important. That comes as part of our enrichment programme as well, and our co-curricular. So we've got some children who are part of Stock Market Club, which runs from year 5 and 6 across to the senior school, and that's been running for 3 years and is at a very exciting time at the moment. Rob set up maths mentors for some children, for so senior school pupils supporting prep pupils with some one-to-one support to help them, but also to stretch and challenge as well. So it's not only a differentiated and a well set out and planned out curriculum in prep, but it's also being able to draw on that specialist knowledge in senior school as well.
Thank you. And just another question, how are we catching up on, or helping the children to catch up on, any lost maths during lockdown outside of year 6?
Okay, so with our remote provision, obviously we went live. Obviously the parents who aren't at Embley won't know this, but from day 1 we were teaching a full timetable live from year 1 to year 6. However, obviously remote learning is going to feel very different for different children, and some will have grasped key knowledge, others perhaps may not have done. So diagnostic testing is really important. So we've actually this week have been doing some a PUMA, which is a progress and understanding in maths, and we use that for gaps teaching, actually, to look at the different key strands in the same way as we would do with reading. So that way we can identify for individuals anything that needs addressing one-to-one, but it also gives us themes of perhaps the whole cohort might need to have support and actually reteaching in certain areas. So it's a combination of sort of obviously knowing what we've taught, but actually doing a little bit of diagnostic testing to see what we need to teach next term.
Thank you. And just another question, do you know of any great online resources for parents if they don't know the answer? Oh,
that's a good question. Mr. Clare, have you got some wonderful things up your sleeve?
Well, I'm a huge fan of a website called Enrich, and Enrich poses kind of more problem-solving kind of questions, more discussion questions, and they do actually have excellent descriptions of answers. So if you put in Enrich short mathematical thinking problems, if you go on there, you can actually have a discussion with your child about the problem that's going on, and then look at the answer, which gives a nice description as well. Yes, I'd recommend that one, I suppose.
Thank you. And just another question, particularly for prep school. So are there any support documents to help parents understand how maths is being taught at Embley?
Now that's something I was thinking about this evening when I was having a read through my notes before we started. It would be nice to actually hear from parents, because we're always sort of planning our next steps as to how to support. So from a sort of a parenting workshops point of view, hopefully when we're all in a hall together and in the same room, I'm more than happy to look at actually, you know, things like calculation strategies and actually teaching you how to support your children to look at how we're actually teaching at Embley. So if that's the feedback we get, that would be supportive, I'm more than happy to put some things on and perhaps send some information out to you. So things like calculation strategies. Wonderful, and I think that's it for the questions. Thank you. Fabulous. Thank you very much. So huge thanks, Rob, for joining us this evening. It's really exciting being part of a whole school. As I say, you've got a combination of being a prep school which is pastorally strong, having high expectations, but fantastic sort of care and support, and the ability to tap into that subject specialism. It's quite interesting that there are lots of links actually being an English specialist between maths and reading comprehension. So I was listening to some of the vocabulary Rob was using there, explaining, justifying, reasoning, and those are skills I think you can use across both subjects. But we'll continue to ignite the passion of our young mathematicians and developing that growth mindset, and hopefully you'll do the same. So huge thanks for joining us this evening, and have a lovely evening.